Good morning. My name is Adise Coulibaly. Welcome to the Title I 2020 application changes and reminders. This webinar will be recorded and posted to the Title website. If you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to chat in. We will address those questions, and we will also take questions at the end. Today, we will provide updates on supplement, not supplant methodology, as well as new requirements for the 2020 Title I application. We will also share information regarding dyslexia legislation and how that impacts Title I. And finally, we will conclude with providing some reminders as you prepare to submit your 2020 application. Methodology refers to the manner in which state and local funds are allocated to schools. The LEA's description of the chosen methodology to allocate these funds will be provided on the district information page in the Title I application. The methodology does not take into account a school's Title I status. IDOE will recognize the following methodologies. Many LEAs have chosen to use Form 9 to demonstrate compliance. If choosing this method, you need to show that the district utilized per pupil spending as an upfront allocation method to ensure equity, rather than solely relying upon an after-the-fact analysis of expenditures. That is if you were choosing to demonstrate your methodology using PPE. And many of the corporations that are choosing to do that are using Form 9 to demonstrate this. The other options are to demonstrate using staffing and supplies distribution, as well as the distribution of state and local resources based on a combined approach, or another methodology as adopted by the LEA. Beginning with the 2019-2020 school year, due to updated federal guidance that we have received, the following LEAs are exempt from complying with methodology requirements. The first group that are exempt are LEAs with one school for the entire school corporation, as in charters. This refers to the legal configuration of one school and not just whether multiple legal schools are located within one physical building. The second group that are exempt are LEAs where all grade spans have a single school. No methodology is required for the single school grade span. So if you have one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school, you would be exempt, similarly to the way you would be exempt with comparability. The final category are LEAs with only Title I schools. This applies if all of the schools within the corporation are Title I. If you have Title I schools, all the elementary schools are Title I, but then you have a non-Title middle and high school, you're still required to do methodology. But if all of the school districts within the corporation are Title I, you are exempt. Here you will find the website to the Title I Application Center. On it at the bottom, if you are needing to request an account, there is a click here button where you can submit that request. You can also let your grant specialist know if you have any changes in terms of user access to the application. We're going to start with new requirements for the 2020 application. On the district information page, you will see a question where you are being asked to provide the URL where your LEA report card is posted on your school district's website. This is a new requirement under ESSA, and you just need to provide the URL where the LEA report card is posted. The second thing that you will see, and many of you have seen this as you're doing your amendments or you were working on your 19 application, is on the public school pages, there are a number of questions that in this prior year were optional. For this school year, they are all required. All of the questions on the public school information page need to be completed. All the fields will require a response to be able to move on to the next page in the application. So as you're working on your application, you may need to type a placeholder if you intend to come back and work on your responses at a later time. There are two questions regarding how the school supports transitions, the transition from preschool into kindergarten, as well as the transition from middle school to high school and high school to post-secondary. There is also a question regarding how the LEA will monitor student progress.
Another new requirement in regards to ESSA and submission through the Title I grant is regarding the LEA's equity data for equitable access to effective educators across all types of schools and student groups. So very soon, the Department of Ed is going to be providing equity data reports to all LEAs that provides a snapshot of the equity data for out-of-field teachers, inexperienced teachers, but also effective and ineffective teachers. For most LEAs, the disparity that might occur are going to occur in the two categories that you'll see on your screen, the out-of-field teachers and the inexperienced teachers. The Department of Ed ran your data according to your staffing information that you provide to us in regards to out-of-field teachers, which is defined as someone with an emergency license. Are children at Title I schools more likely to have teachers that are not as qualified as children at non-Title I schools? Likewise, the data report will also show whether children of specific student groups like low-income or minority students are more likely to have teachers that are out-of-field or inexperienced. If that is the case, you'll see a rate of disparity. So in this screenshot, this LEA has several numbers that are higher than 1, which indicates a disparity where low-income minority students or students at Title I schools have higher rates of out-of-field and inexperienced teachers. In that scenario, the LEA should, in their answer on that public school page, state how they're using their federal funds to address this. So, for example, it could be if you have a lot of new teachers in your highest need buildings, then what are you doing long-term to address that? You might have a mentoring plan, an induction plan, or processes in place to ensure that your best teachers are staying in your neediest schools. Likewise, if you have out-of-field teachers, you might want to encourage, require, or facilitate them becoming certified in the areas that they teach, such as through Title II professional development dollars. So this information will be provided to you very soon so that you can answer the equity question on your Title I application. Another question that is likely going to require the LEA to provide information that they've not answered before. ESSA requires the LEA to state how the school will support efforts to reduce overuse of discipline practices that remove students from the classroom, including high rates of discipline disaggregated by certain subgroups of students. So, for example, if your homeless students are suspended at twice the rate as everyone else, your African-American boys are expelled at 4 times the rate of everyone else. There are lots of different examples of disparities, but when drilling down to specific student groups, if you have disparities in discipline, then another encouraged use of funding is to address your positive behavior systems that operate in the school, restorative practices, training, and so on. Very recently, the Department of Ed created a comprehensive positive school discipline resource guide, as well as an equitable school discipline model policy. This type of information you've also submitted in past years through your civil rights data collections. So all of that type of information, along with these resources, can be used to address any disproportionality in terms of discipline. Another question regarding the public school page ties to any LEA who has a Title I funded preschool. So for this specific question, if the LEA provides preschool within the district, how will it support, coordinate, and integrate services under Title I with early childhood education programs at the LEA? So this question is only if the preschool is Title I funded. All LEAs have some kind of preschool because of students with disabilities and Part C funding, but many of you all also partner with Head Start, you have parent pay, and other options. If those are the only types of preschool, you can mark non-applicable in this box. If you do have Title I preschool, you do need to answer how the Title I preschool is coordinated with the other early childhood ed programs. Another requirement is that if you do have a Title I funded preschool, statute requires the Title I funded preschool to follow the Head Start performance standards. If you are not familiar with that, or you are not implementing the Head Start performance standards, then you can mark on this box that you are going to participate in further training. The Department of Ed is going to offer training this upcoming school year for our Title I funded preschools so that they are aware of what the Head Start performance standards are so that they can implement them effectively. So for many of you, you'll mark NA. For those that have it, provide your coordination description as well as your current status of Head Start performance standards implementation. Another set of questions that we've received frequently has been related to dyslexia legislation in Title I. The new state statute that has required several new procedures and designated points of contact are required to be put into place for the 1920 school year. And so because of it being a state requirement and many program administrators familiar with federal requirements have had questions about how those two things interact. So in short, the state statute requires that at least one person per school corporation or charter school is funded or trained in how to support students with characteristics of dyslexia. And so for federal purposes, if that one person that the school corporation designates to be trained works in Title I schools, then you can use your Title I funding to support the costs of training that person. The reason why this is allowed is because of the changes for the supplement, not supplant methodology, where you have a methodology that describes equity and financing rather than looking at each individual cost. So if the district chooses to train more than the statutorily required one person, then other grants such as Title II and Title IV could train additional people, as well as Title I could train additional people too. Because of the supplement, not supplant requirements of Title II and Title IV, they could not fund the one and only person, but Title I can. We have a brief for you that you can read in greater detail if you have more questions. Some of the questions that we've received are, since statute requires students to be screened for characteristics of dyslexia, if they are found to have characteristics of dyslexia and they are in Title I schools, can we use Title I to serve their needs according to the screener results? The answer is yes. Historically, school districts have been serving children in need that might have had characteristics of dyslexia through their Title I funding, because often Title I supports literacy interventions. That should not change, and that can continue. So those groups can be coordinated together. It can be funded wholly or in part by Title I. However, we have non-Title I schools in many districts, so those students are also entitled to services or interventions if they are found to have characteristics of dyslexia. In that case, if it's a non-Title I school, Title I funding cannot support those services at non-Title I buildings. You would use state and local funds only. And then also a key concept in terms of universal screening, Title I, the non-regulatory guidance states that universal screening cannot occur with Title I funds or Title I funded staff. So the screeners that the department has provided or ones that the district may choose to purchase needs to occur with state and local funds, and then your state and local funded staff need to be administering those screeners.
Okay, we have a few reminders as you are preparing to submit your 2020 application. The first one is in regards to non-public school consultation. LEAs must use the new consolidated consultation form beginning for the 2020 application. There is a link here that provides you with those forms. There is one form for the Title I Part A, and then there is a separate form that addresses the other title grants. The second form that is shown on the screen here is the form that will take place of the non-public information pages in the Title II application. Just a reminder of the suggested non-pub consultation timeline. This is the time of year where you should be starting to meet with your non-pubs to make plans for the upcoming school year. The homeless set-aside, the amount is to benefit homeless students who attend Title I and non-Title I schools. All LEAs that receive Title I are required to complete the homeless reservation template. This form is attached to the summary page in your Title I application. We have provided a link here to the homeless count that your district has provided to DOE. We need you to check your homeless count to make sure that you're determining a reasonable and necessary amount as you are determining your set-aside for the upcoming school year. All LEAs that serve kindergarten are required to complete the Head Start coordination form. The goal of this coordination is to provide higher quality learning experiences and a more seamless transition to kindergarten. You will respond yes to the question on the district information page asking about Head Start coordination, and you would attach the completed Head Start coordination form to the application summary page. You are not required to submit your formal agreement between the corporation and Head Start to us, but this is something that you would maintain on your files. There is a link here to the Head Start map, as there are Head Start offices that serve multiple counties, and you would need to determine which Head Start to contact. If you have questions in terms of your contact person at your local Head Start, you can reach out to your federal grant specialist. So another reminder as you are preparing your Title I application is just some tips to help minimize future amendments. As you are planning on providing descriptions for your allocations in your budget, you need to keep in mind that it's important to provide enough information and detail to justify the costs. However, you don't want to provide too many details, such as specific names of attendees that would require additional amendments for slight changes. As you can see on this screen, here's an example. The first example, you're just saying you're spending $15,000 on professional development. That description would be considered too vague, as your specialist would not be able to determine what specifically you are interested in doing with those dollars. The second description says professional development, and it has specific staff names attending a reading recovery conference. The last one, it just says there are 3 team members that will attend a literacy workshop, and it says that the goals are aligned to district goals for reading recovery and the travel costs per local travel policy. That way, with the third description, if it was determined that different team members would attend, you would not need to submit an amendment to make those corrections. Additional reminders, make sure that everything on your budget has a description below in the coding box. You need to keep in mind that you should be using correct object coding. For example, registration for professional development belongs in professional services, while other costs for PD, travel, per diem, lodging belong in other purchase services. There is an example expenditures document on our Title I website that gives you examples of the correct object coding for each category. For those LEAs that are receiving $500,000 or more, please make sure that you also have your mandatory parental involvement set aside on the district-wide set aside page. 90% of this amount must be used at the school level, and your amount of parental involvement set aside on the eligible school summary page at the school level, plus any district-wide parental involvement set aside, has to equal the total set aside that your district has determined.
A question that we received regarding this slide, this type of information would be important to apply in your other funding streams as well. So for example, if you were using Title II dollars for professional development, attempt to follow that third example so that you are focusing on the types of professional development that you are seeking out regarding the content rather than just picking a conference because of the title. Or you may not know the conference that you're going to seek out because it may be a year in advance. So do use that information for other funding streams as well. The next information that we'll address is Title I and foster care. Many of you are aware, as well as many of you are the points of contact for your district, but ESSA instituted some new requirements for both homeless and foster care. So on this slide, we're going to talk about foster care specifically. This required stronger collaboration at the state level between DCS and IDOE, as well as at the local level. Both the state educational agency, which is IDOE, and DCS have to have a separate point of contact than what we have for McKinney-Vento. At the LEA level, the homeless point of contact and the foster care point of contact can be the same person. But every single LEA must have a foster care point of contact. DCS has educational liaisons that they fund. These are not your points of contact. You need a local funded LEA employee who is the foster care point of contact. That person would get any placement notifications from DCS that a child in your district is now a foster student or is enrolling and they've already been a foster care student. That point of contact also is important to make sure transportation occurs as required. One of the things that is required to occur when a foster care student is identified or enrolls in your district is that a new point of contact checklist that DCS has been sharing with school districts must be created or updated. That point of contact checklist is mainly to determine what the best interest placement in regards to school is. Title I statute under ESSA requires that the child, when they become a foster care student, is entitled to stay in their school of origin if that school of origin is deemed in the best interest. So if the child lives with their biological family, but then are placed in a foster care home in a different district, many times that child is going to stay in the original school corporation. In that scenario, Title I statute requires that those two school districts, the school of origin as well as where the child currently lives, are going to have to share transportation costs and must determine those within 5 instructional days of that decision. DCS does have the final decision. If there are ever any questions regarding this policy, the foster care students need to be enrolled immediately, and then the family or the school corporation or DCS can always reach out to IDOE to determine specific things that need to be addressed. One additional piece, the written transportation plans for that student are required. Title I, there is a district level set aside that if you want to use funding to offset the excess cost, so the additional cost that is beyond your typical per student busing cost, you could use Title I district level funds to offset some or all of that cost as long as it's reasonable and necessary, and you can carry out your other activities at the school level. A timeline reminder, in order for school districts to be able to revert costs and start the next school year using their Title I funding, then all Title I grants for the 1920 school year need to be submitted by July 1st, 2019. The application center is currently open for you to create or edit or submit your application. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to your federal grant specialist, as well as myself, Nathan Williamson, and Adis Koulibaly, who have presented the information for you today. That is the end of our webinar, so we are going to stop the recording. We will stay on if you would like to submit any questions in the chat box.